Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good day to everyone who has joined us this wonderful day on this wonderful program that we are taking part in, which is at the Halal in Travel Global Summit 2022 under the theme Making Access to Halal Food Easier for Muslim Travelers. Though halal food is a requirement for Muslims, it is always not easily accessible for those living outside of Muslim majority countries. The nature of halal makes it challenging to determine whether or not a product qualifies simply by looking at it. While certain items like pork and alcohol are outright prohibited, many other considerations do not show up on a product label, such as how an animal was slaughtered, whether the ingredient is a halal ingredient, or what the source of the enzyme or the gelatin is. Therefore, achieving halal certification and making certain that the establishment is providing halal food that is to the requirement of the Muslim traveler is quite essential for both manufacturers, destination marketers, and the tourist industry in general. Today, we are joined by an eminent panel of experts who have a wide range of and diverse range of experience in the halal industry. We have Moulana Mohamed Saeed Navlakhi, who is the head of the South African National Halal Authority based in South Africa, who has a depth of experience in both the certification and in enabling businesses to adapt to the halal environment. We're also joined by Adnan Durrani, who is the founder and CEO of American Halal and Saffron Road, based in the US, and probably one of the largest suppliers of ready-to-eat halal foods in the US. Welcome, Moulana Navlakhi and Brother Adnan Durrani.
Jazakallah khair.
Let's kick off with the Moulana so that we can set the scene. Moulana, in your total experience of many years, there is a wide range of requirements that a manufacturer or a business needs to adapt to in order to be halal certified. Can you take us through some of the basic requirements for an establishment or a manufacturer to be halal certified?
Jazakallah khair. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Look, the most important and fundamental thing that has to be focused on when it comes to halal certification of food establishments is that you partner with a halal certification body that has the required credibility, credentials, and bona fides. The process they will outline in respect of the type of facility or food establishment that you have. Specifically, when it comes to a private establishment, although that private establishment may either be Muslim owned or may be a non-Muslim owned entity, the requirements in terms of management and control would differ. Where the outlet or the establishment is a Muslim owned establishment, there is already that know-how and that information that is available and accessible to the Muslim proprietor in terms of what is required for halal. Where the proprietor is non-Muslim owned, obviously they've got to be educated, they've got to be well trained and equipped with what is required, in addition to having Muslim staff to assist in the daily operations of a halal food establishment. The core areas that are critical for a food establishment to be eligible for halal certification is that the entire supply chain of raw materials and or products, finished products that are being utilized by the food establishment is compliant. So if it's meat products, then it should come from halal certified sources through a halal certified supply chain, lest there is any contamination that happens in between. All raw materials, including spices, seasonings, marinades, and other manufacturing aids utilized in the preparation of food must be compliant as well. In addition to the raw materials and products that are utilized, we also have to ensure that the environment which is being utilized for this is dedicated for the manufacture of halal food. There isn't any other food products that are being manufactured in a common area, the equipment that is being utilized also should be compliant. You don't want to be making a chicken tikka product or a bakery product or any other product which requires glazing or basting, where a bristle brush is used from pork origin. And it's interesting to know this, because many a Muslim-owned establishment that has been operating for halal for many years, when they apply for halal certification, this is a very common area that where we find problems with, is that the basting brush or the glazing instrument that is being used is made with natural bristle brushes, and 9.9 out of 10 those bristle brushes are made and manufactured from hog hairs, which is pig hairs. So you could have a halal certified product, a halal product, but you are compromising the halal status of that product by basting it with a pork bristle brush. So this
So
is just a
effectively,
brief and overview of the critical areas.
So effectively, Moulana, what you're saying is that halal is not just about in terms of the procurement of the material or the preparation, but it's the entire ecosystem which gives confidence to the consumer to know that, using the phrase, that from farm to fork, there is transparency and there's accountability in the process.
100% integrity of that supplier chain is actually fundamental to make a halal claim for your end product.
So, Brother Adnan, as a producer of halal foods, and you have a wealth of experience having gone through a number of companies and the type of products that you're producing in the US, how do you gain access to the market, and what in your experience would be the opportunities that exist in making access to halal food easier? Because we have travelers that are traveling now from different parts of the world. You have a huge demand in domestic countries, and there is now a growing demand for ready to eat foods as well. A lot of retailers are now looking to stock halal products. What makes it easier for the establishment or the retailer or even the tourist destination to have access to these halal products?
Sure. Assalamu alaikum, Ebrahim, and thank you very much for inviting me to this panel, and wonderful to see you as well, Moulana. It's, for us, it really is about how you position halal, because, we're in a non-majority Muslim country. You're a very tiny minority of 2% or maybe a little bit more. So we're really appealing. If we just appeal to the Muslim consumer as we're presenting to retailers, we're not going to get a lot of, traction there. So what we try to do is we talk really sort of universally about universal values around halal, especially tayyib, because as Moulana so well pointed out, it really is critical to have a integrity of halal certification. We happen to use Afanka, but we make sure that all of the farms we source from, first of all, everything that's done is Zabih halal, everything is hand slaughtered in the traditional way, reciting the Tasmiyah, as well as the fact that we go way above that. So, for example, when we entered Whole Foods 12 years ago, which was our main partner back then, we talked about the fact that we made sure that all of our farms had livestock that was only 100% vegetarian fed, that all of our poultry products had to have no antibiotics ever. That's called NAE, not just antibiotic free. We actually got certification. We were the first frozen entree in the world, not just halal, but any company in the world, to get certified humane for our products. And what that means is we put our farms through very rigorous audit, that they have to treat the animals humanely. They have to pass an animal welfare audit, because the Prophet ﷺ used to say the slaughter of the zabiyah is more important sometimes than even, how you treat the animals is more important than even the zabiyah. So we go through all of those rigorous routines. And also, we were the first frozen entree that was non-GMO verified. We don't just claim we don't have GMOs. We don't just claim that we're halal. We don't just claim that we're gluten-free. We go through rigorous certifications authorities to reach those levels before we launch a product. So I think the fact that we go through all of that, when we approach a retailer, like when we approach Whole Foods, our standards around tayyib and healthy products and clean label was way above Whole Foods. They had nothing like that in their retailer. So we didn't necessarily approach them and say, hey, you have to have a halal product because there's Muslims in every state that Whole Foods is in. That was not our approach at all. We didn't want to pontificate. We're not religious leaders. We're basically business folks who are very cued into halal values around tayyib and wholesome, sustainable farming, clean label. So since we approached it from that level, Whole Foods really embraced us, and they said, wow, these are the values that we aspire to with our consumers and with our shoppers. So as a result, we had alhamdulillah, a very successful launch. We're now in 25,000 stores nationally. We're in every state in America. We're the largest halal brand nationally in the country. And 85% of our consumers are not even Muslim. They're natural food consumers who are very attracted to our values around halal. So that's the way you create access. Is there's been a huge movement the last 5 years, and especially during COVID and post-COVID, the last 2 years, of consumers really being attracted to brands that have clean label, that are antibiotic free, that never use hormones, that are vegetarian fed, that treat the animals humanely in the livestock chain, as well as the fact that we index. Nielsen just did a study on us, and what they found out is that we index 155% with millennials, and that was always our model to begin with. That's a young, vibrant population. U.S. Goldman Sachs says it's the largest growing and the most wealthiest demographic in America's 240-year history. And we happen to be the #1 brand, not just halal, I mean, among all brands, including Nestle's brands, including ConAgra's brands, that has affinity with the millennial consumer. So how do we track this more educated consumer? We also index 300% with affluent suburbans. So how do we index so high with them? It was because we really set some very high values for our brand, which happened to be halal, which happened to be Sharia, by the way. But what we're really trying to promote is a value system. And I'd like to say that if you can sell values for a value, that's really what works in America. And so we've been very fortunate that now we're in Walmart and Kroger and all the major retailers as the #1 brand, not just halal brand, the #1 meals brand in the better for you category in each of those retailers.
So what you are seeing is actually not just the demand from the Muslim consumer, but those that are ethically conscious and are looking to brands that are ethically sustainable as well at the same time.
Exactly. I mean,
it's this move towards a health conscious and an ethical conscious consumer.
Exactly. It's a term that I coined several years ago called ethical consumerism. So we're a leader in the ethical consumerism movement, which happens to be halal. And so by doing that in a non-majority Muslim country, we really have a much wider blanket that we're casting across the country. And many consumers love our halal values. They may not even know what the halal means, but when they dig into and see what the values are around the brand, that's what attracts them. And then we make sure, and this is the key, we make sure that we are bulletproof, that we are true to those values. We make sure that if somebody comes and inspects our plants or looks under the veil, they'll find exactly what we state. So we're very dogged about that. And it's not easy. It's a grueling process to go through what we go through. It certainly is a lot less profitable than other brands that take shortcuts. But we're competing against $100 billion brands like Nestle's Lean Cuisine and Stouffer's, Kraft Heinz brands, ConAgra's Healthy Choice. Our competitors actually are not halal companies at all. Our competitors are the large CPG companies in U.S.
So what we have is actually both Moulana Navlakhi and Adnan operating within non-Muslim majority countries, which are basically secular, and you've created a niche. And Moulana, as SANHA, you've really created an opportunity for halal in the mainstream of the South African consumer market. We've seen a number of not just manufacturers, but also food franchises that are going the halal route. There's obviously a huge demand, but SANHA is doing something correctly, or it's doing something properly that is allowing this growth within the South African environment. And actually now we've seen the growth into the Southern African environment. What is it that you can share with us is the experience of how SANHA has managed to position and bring halal to the forefront, even to multinational brands?
Yes, the bottom line really, as Brother Adnan also pointed out, is to be able to sell your values in a manner that it's not religious, in a manner that even the industry which is non-Muslim or consumers that are non-Muslim can identify with. Wholesome food and this entire concept can only come about with a strong emphasis on education and awareness. If I look back 25 years ago when SANHA was established, we interacted with industry who had a very, very simplistic understanding of what halal is. Anything that's pork free or anything that doesn't have liquor, alcohol, is fine. And some of them, obviously, we've got statements that industries have given to us, written, documented statements that our food is halal because it's free from pork, it's free from blood, it's free from alcohol, and it's free from dog. So some industries included dog as well in the process. Anyway, but I think this boom and this inclination and embracing of halal has come about purely because of reaching out to people, having education and awareness programs at every level in both the Muslim community as well as the broader industry, that we find this tremendous growth in the country. Keeping also in mind the fact that our, although we're just a 2% Muslim minority, we also have a huge Muslim trade component, and I think they played a fundamental role as well in this process of creating this awareness to their suppliers and to their area of interaction with the industry and with government. That we find not only are the industry embracing this process, but even the government of South Africa has played a very, very active role over the last decade in the promotion and development of the halal industry, including halal tourism.
But we now see that there's a huge demand in terms of halal tourist destinations. Coming to your point, Moulana, that this market, halal tourism, is a growing market, and there's an increased interest by non-traditional markets to enter into this space. We've seen countries like Japan, Spain, South Africa, all others wanting to enter into the space of attracting Muslim tourists to come to those countries. But travelers want assurance that the establishment that they would visit in a foreign destination is suitable to their halal requirements, that the destination caters for the, we would call it the accessibility or the acceptability of the Muslim demand. What would establishments or destinations do in order to overcome the challenges of assurances of meeting those halal requirements? So not just from a food perspective, but in terms of an experiential perspective.
Is this question for myself?
Yes, Moulana.
Okay, good. Look, with regards, I think it's very, very important and fundamental that people, that stakeholders understand their market. If you have to know your market, and I think the growth of halal within these non-Muslim countries or non-traditional markets, if we call them that, is purely because, look, South Africa is a bit different, and I think we can't just use a common paintbrush for all. But I think South Africa is very different in that we've had a very strong consumer demand for halal over the decades. Halal in South Africa, or halal certification in South Africa, is as old as probably 40 to 50 years now, although on a very much more smaller scale in the early days, where only meat abattoirs, poultry and red meat abattoirs were being supervised and certified. And as time progressed and trends changed in terms of consumer trends, in terms of demographics and people that have visited South Africa in pre-1990 would understand the challenges faced by the community. So South Africa is very different from that. But in other non-traditional markets like Japan, obviously they've seen the need. They've seen that there's this huge market. We can't even call it a niche market anymore because it's gone mainstream. So these countries have taken the initiative to try and get a share in this growing market and to target halal tourism for that specific purpose. South Africa has South Africa has a ready-made, halal infrastructure in terms of accessibility to halal products, in terms of accessibility to halal food establishments. So we're very much different from the broader global community, in my opinion.
So basically, it would also need a sort of an acceptability of the halal or the Muslim tourists coming to a destination. If I take the instance of Japan, Japan became more open and welcoming towards the Muslim tourists, acceptability of the culture, the dressing, the differentiation in the foods. So these are some of the issues that would need to be looked at by those particular destinations as well.
Certainly, and these needs differ from country to country and market to market. It's for an example, if you have a traveler that comes through from a country like Malaysia, or Singapore or Southeast Asia, where halal is supported by governments, awareness is at a different level. They have specific needs and expectations. They will not come to go to a restaurant, which is also offering pork products, for an example, because the areas, so if you go to a restaurant and the target market is Malaysian tourists or tourists from Southeast Asia, they are going to be very sensitive about these things. That how is it that you're selling halal and pork within a common area, the common kitchen, or they also serving alcohol freely, in the kitchen area or in the restaurant area. These are the type of things that we've got to be very conscious of, and this would differ, as I say, from country to country. You would get somebody coming from other countries which are less stringent about the places they patronize. Some would look out for a halal certification and not ask any questions. Some would purely look out for a halal claim, even if it's made just with a little Arabic inscription on the wall and a little frame in the inside of the establishment, and accept that. So it's important to know, firstly, your target market, and the easiest thing for the industry to do is really subscribe to the best standard and to the best practices, so that you are able to accommodate all and sundry.
Adnan, you've seen in the US, it's a large market for tourists from Southeast Asia and from the subcontinent. Are you seeing the culture changing in the US to become more acceptable towards the Muslim traveler? I mean, many of us would like to go to Disney, or we'd like to go to various parts of the US. Are you seeing that there's a change that caters to the Muslim tourists?
Yes, I mean, I am seeing more and more halal venues in terms of restaurants. You're definitely seeing more availability in some grocery outlets as well. So yeah, I think it is improving. I mean, obviously you have to look at each venue separately, and I think the more Muslim consumers who travel, Muslim travelers who travel to the US, more they demand or ask for that, no matter what hotel they're staying in, or if they're staying at Disney, the more they make those kinds of requests, I think you'll start to see more and more focus on that, because you have to speak up, and America does respond to the consumer's demand. So we are seeing better availability than, say, 5 or 10 years ago. But I'll also say that, as we all know, travel costs have gone up dramatically the last 30 days, okay, let alone the last year, right? The airline fares are up 30%. Hotel, I was just listening to the CEO of Marriott. Their fares at Marriott hotels are up over 40% in the last 6 months. So as people are traveling, and the dollar has obviously surged, so as they're coming from overseas to US, their budgets are squeezed. And so when you're looking at that, and then you look at what it costs to have a meal in, even if it's a vegetarian meal, in a hotel or in a Disney or in a travel location, if you can't get halal, it's extremely expensive. And then if you look at even going to a restaurant that's halal, it's also very expensive nowadays for a foreign traveler coming to US. So what I would encourage is, whether it's Saffron Road or any other frozen entree product, doesn't really matter. I mean, of course, we prefer you buy our products, but any products you buy in a grocery store that are halal and that are entrees are an incredible value. They're 50 to 70% cheaper than eating at a restaurant, number one. Number two, every hotel has a microwave, right, and a fridge, so you can easily store them. Number three, when you're traveling on vacation or doing tourism, you're on a busy schedule, so you don't have to eat a frozen entree every day, but you could have a couple times a week for the family. It's a lot more feasible, a lot more, a lot healthier. I mean, if you go have a halal burger, it could be 2,000 calories. Most entrees like ours are less than 800 calories, 600 calories, very healthy. And the options available in terms of variety of meals, I like to say during COVID, people were sequestered. They couldn't really travel. Alhamdulillah, thank God they're able to travel now. So they did what I call wanderlust. They traveled through cuisines. They got their adventure through different world cuisines. We're the leader in world cuisine. So you can have a selection of whether it's Mexican or whether it's Indian or Pakistani, or whether it's Middle Eastern, or whether it's Chinese and Thai. If you go to the grocery stores, they have a natural food section. And in that section of the frozen entree section, there's a number of wonderful brands that are celebrating all of these great cuisines that are also halal. And so you could have that selection when you come to the US and create some variety for yourself. But most importantly, in this economic environment of inflation, you can have a more affordable vacation than having to load up on your credit cards and pay them when you get back home.
You point to a very important trend, because now we are seeing, as tourists are moving to different destinations, it's no longer about staying in fancy hotels, but it's about the experience. And hotels are moving towards an apartment style of accommodation rather than just a normal hotel room, because there's a growing demand for families living together in an apartment hotel. So obviously there's the demand for the food as well. So that you point out to a very important trend.
Airbnb is also been very much driven that, because Airbnb has been doing that. You're seeing hotels now accommodating similar venues.
And that demand for halal food is no longer confined to the Muslim consumer. There's a rise in demand from consumers from other faiths as well, that are quite happy to buy ready to eat meals.
Yeah, it's interesting. We get a lot of great responses on our social media from evangelical Christians, from a lot of Jewish cousins, I call them, who say that they love our products. They appeal to the same values around faith and around social responsibility that they feel strongly about. We've had vegetarians say to us that we started eating your products, meat products actually, because we went vegetarian because of the horrible conditions in the meat industry, but because of the way you treat animal humane welfare, and because you never use antibiotics, and because of the farms that you source from, we started eating a lot of your, we call it better for you, animal protein products. So it is interesting how, these values, I mean, who wouldn't want these kinds of values? They may be halal, but they really appeal to a very broad set of faith-based values for a number of faiths.
Well, Moulana earlier on alluded to the fact that some companies were making statement that they had no dog meat in their food, but we've seen some global fast foods having horse meat in their foods.
Yeah, it's terrible. And I see that Moulana spoke very well about how much it's evolved, the halal industry. I'm still amazed at how many brands in the Middle East still machine slaughter. They don't guarantee that the feed is 100% vegetarian fed. So we have a long way to go. I will say, I think often the halal products, other than Malaysia and Indonesia, which have been amazing, but other than that, in most majority Muslim countries, you're not really getting halal products that are tayyib. You have actually great access in non-Muslim countries to healthier halal products than you have sometimes in Muslim majority countries, to be frank with you.
We have people listening into the conversation from various parts of the world. If someone who is a tour operator or is a destination marketer wanting to target the halal consumer, the halal tourist, what advice would you have? Anyone can take this here. What advice would you have in terms of how an establishment should market itself towards the Muslim consumer, whether it is in terms of how they've positioned their particular outlet, or how they've positioned the type of food that they have? Is it the experience? Is it the culture? What advice would you give to someone who's saying, we want to enter into the halal space, we want to attract the halal consumer, the Muslim consumer, the Muslim tourist? What advice would you put towards them, Moulana?
Yes, I think the most important thing for halal food establishment, or or halal marketers for that matter, that would like to uh, uh, capture a halal market from a specific country or in general. I think the most important thing for them to do is firstly partner with a halal certification body, also partner with travel and tourism agencies in the various markets that you'd like to capture, because until you do not know your target market, you're not going to be able to effectively serve their needs. And it's important that once we understand the target market, we understand the availability of halal tourism in our country, or in the in the specific region or area, we can then accordingly determine exactly what our offering should be. Without having an understanding of the halal market, or without understanding the specific uh, uh, sector that we're trying to capture, we may be shooting ourselves in the foot.
So
Yeah.
we've seen hotels now trying to become more halal friendly, if that's the word that is now being used, in terms of putting in the Qibla markers, the prayer mats, creating the space for ablution. Even some shopping centers, we've seen a number of shopping centers putting in spaces for prayer rooms, the musalla or the surah. Is this something that you've seen as a trend as well in the US, Adnan?
Yeah, I am seeing that, and I think that it's been nice to see that with some of the hotel chains as well. Not all of them, but some of them. And like Marriott's owned by Mormons, right? So you see a Bible in every Marriott
Yeah.
hotel. They don't allow any channels with pornography in their pay-per-view channels. I mean, they're pretty good about. So they are cued into faith-based values, and that's the way I think you should approach them. But me, I'm very quantitative and data-driven, and I think that's been part of our success. So I think, you know collecting data on where Muslim tourists are going in U.S. I'm just talking about U.S. as an example,
Sure.
like Disney's a big destination location, both Anaheim and Orlando, and if you could get and there's ways to get that data. If you could concentrically get that data and seasonally, especially knowing when those Muslim tourists are coming into certain venues, and then approach the operators, whether you're approaching the Disney operators, whether you're approaching Sodexo, or Cisco, the food service companies that supply meals to those hotels or those venues, you can make a pretty strong pitch if you can put the data together. And the data is very compelling. There is an enormous amount of Muslim tourists coming to the U.S. Over the years, and if you can put that data together, and then don't paint it just as a halal opportunity. Paint it as an opportunity that these are younger millennial consumers who have very high education level, who are very discerning about their choices. And if they don't see halal choices, they will go to another venue. And guess what? Other venues are offering them. So I think if you position it like that, I think there are a lot of food service operators and hotels are listening, and they're starting to offer these options.
Moulana, we've seen that a lot and I'll take it from the South African perspective, that a number of shopping centers are creating spaces. The restaurants in there are offering halal products. And this is just a way of keeping the consumer within the shopping center, because the consumer is spoiled for choice. He can go to any shopping center, or she can go to any shopping center that she wants. But here you're finding that these establishments are adapting themselves to a consumer demand.
Most certainly, I think. Look, where it all surrounds the consumer. Without a halal consumer, there's no halal market, and with the awareness globally that consumers are having with regards to halal. I mean, Adnan will tell you, 20 years back in the US, you wouldn't have had the concept of never mind halal meals, but perhaps not even a halal restaurant available.
Right.
Today, there's accessibility of, although they, talking about true halal and and real halal, as the Dubai group calls it, real halal. There's growing awareness, and those that are very stringent about halal, not perhaps those in their 60s and 70s, but the millennials are becoming very, very, very inclined towards this, very strong about it. And in South Africa, I mean, if we take our QSR, that's the quick service restaurant group, it's mainly motivated by the millennials. They are the people that want to try out a new product that has come in. There's a new franchise that is being launched. They want it to be halal compliant, and it's that consumer demand ultimately that drives the market.
100% right. We find that with the millennial population here too, especially my son. I mean, they are very, very rigid about their halal values, and they go viral. They'll tell all their friends. They'll go on WhatsApp. They'll tell everybody on Twitter, you know, this is the restaurant to go to that's purely halal, and this one isn't. And they check all the labels of everything they eat. So this generation, and mashallah, is just a wonderful generation.
Alhamdulillah.
And they're using the social media in order to either make or break a brand as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why brands have to really be
finding people having a good experience, and finding that a restaurant caters to their needs, are sending out that information to their friends who are going to be traveling as well.
Yeah, I'll tell you, in this area, in New York City area, in Connecticut, and there may be a few exceptions, but just about all of the Indian and Pakistani restaurants have converted to halal. Even majority of the Indian restaurants are owned by Hindus, but they've all converted to halal, just because they find it's easier, even though it will only be a minority of their patrons, but the workers are all Muslim. The patrons, ask for halal. They leave the restaurant if it's not halal. So even if it's a minority group coming in asking for that, they found it was just a lot easier to just go completely 100% halal.
Well, as you point out, that it's the quantitative side of it that's making those decisions for a large number of multinationals, because they know that the Muslim population, the global Muslim population, is the fastest growing, and it's going to be the majority population across the globe. And obviously, they are tuning in to that consumer market more than anything else.
Yeah,
certainly.
So it's easier for them to create one supply chain and one facility that is totally halal, rather than having two separate facilities.
That's New Zealand's example, for example. That's exactly what New Zealand's doing.
So, Moulana, in terms of where companies position themselves, you spoke about certification, you spoke about integrity, you spoke about transparency. But what does, if there's a restaurant, like Adnan points out, that there are non-Muslim restaurants in the US, in New York, that are moving to the halal space. We've seen that happen in South Africa with a number of the fast food franchises. But what advice would you give to someone that is saying that they want to get into this here, but they really don't know whether it's going to work for them or not?
Yeah. Look, I think where you have a strong local consumer, it has to work. People. I mean, we know the eating trends in our market, and people love to eat out. Before, it used to be a weekend eat out. Today, it's almost, eating out has become, whether it's a business meeting, whether it's a social gathering or a chat, or whether it's families where both parents are eating out. And therefore, even these ready meals has a huge potential in many countries. Like Adnan has very well established themselves there. There's a huge opportunity out there, because people, I mean, with both parents working, you don't want to come home tired and then go out. So that's a huge area that can be explored as well.
Adnan keeps pointing out to millennials, and obviously the research shows that as millennials are progressing, we're finding that the kitchen is no longer the important part of a home. An elder generation would have said that the family centered around the kitchen, but newer homes that you are seeing in the mass market, the kitchen is extremely small. The center is around the entertainment area. And so people are buying more fast foods and eat outs, and maybe taking them home as well.
Somewhat. It's a combination of things. During COVID, because of eating at home, cooking, even among millennials, went up dramatically, because they were using Instagram to get recipes, and they were at home, working the whole time.
Banana cake was the famous thing.
Yeah, exactly. But many got fatigued by cooking so much, including baby boomers, not just millennials. And so you see a convergence now where they're still cooking somewhat at home, more than they did, say, before 2019. But at the same time, they are definitely attracted to convenience and frozen meals. We saw the frozen category grow by 2x the last couple of years. The first time it grew at that level ever in 100 years. So it's definitely a new paradigm, and that habit is stuck with consumers. And the beautiful thing we have as a Muslim community, especially in America, is that 70% of the population in America, of American Muslims, are millennials. So that is a very strong statement to make to the venues, the retail outlets, the Disneys of the world, the hotel chains, that this is a key demographic. It may be a minority in America, but it's a key demographic that's really at the spearhead of what your brand is all about. If you really want to attract this consumer who has very high spending power, very educated, very brand loyal, then you need to appeal to the halal consumer.
Moulana Navlakhi from the SANHA, South African National Halal Authority, Adnan Durrani from Saffron Road Foods in the US. Thank you very much for sharing that your time with us today on expanding on the opportunities for access into the Muslim market and for halal food access. To our listeners, the huge opportunity presented by the Muslim consumer and the halal industry is something that cannot be ignored. It's almost like a tsunami. You have to ride this wave because the opportunities that have been created in almost a $3 trillion industry, and if you are not getting into this business or into this industry, it's something that's going to be passing you by. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. And we wish all our listeners well in their journeys going forward. This has been an edition of the Halal in Travel Global Summit 2022. Shukran. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakumullah khair. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.